The Minions have been a significant part of pop culture for the past 16 years. What started as a few funny yellow side characters in Despicable Me back in 2010 has somehow grown into one of the biggest entertainment brands on the planet. As of the new movie Minions and Monsters, we've had 4 Despicable Me films, 3 Minions movies, countless shorts, TV specials, mobile games, toys, memes, theme park attractions, and enough merchandise to fill entire supermarket aisles. This year they even appeared alongside football superstar Kylian Mbappe during the World Cup in promotional campaigns. Now that's just bizarre. At this point it feels like Minions can sell literally anything. They're no longer supporting characters. They're Illumination's mascot. Before every Illumination movie, including the recent Super Mario films for example, the first thing you see is the Minions messing around with the studio logo. They're the face of the company. I've never been a fan and mostly just found them annoying. I never understood why they became this cultural phenomenon. Most of the movies relied on lazy, slapstick, childish, nonsensical humor and endless chaos. I get that their brand of humor is very universal and is mostly made for small children, but it simply wasn't for me. They were entertaining enough, but never particularly memorable. So imagine my surprise when I walked out of Minions and Monsters thinking, that was actually pretty good. Not just by Minion standards, by animated family film standards. It's still very much a Minions movie, but it's also easily the most focused, the most creative, and surprisingly the most cine-literate entry this franchise has ever produced. As someone who's obsessed with cinema and film history, this silly Minions movie that is somehow a love letter to filmmaking constantly caught me off guard. One of the smartest decisions in this movie is changing the setting entirely. Instead of another generic modern-day adventure or a continuation of their story with young Gru, we're transported back to 1920s Hollywood, where the Minions accidentally become silent movie stars before trying to save their careers by making the greatest monster movie ever made. It's such a ridiculous premise, but to me, it's the first Minions movie that actually feels like it has an idea, not just a collection of gags, an actual concept, with tons of references and nods to early cinema that film lovers will appreciate. And somehow, it all works. What surprised me most is just how many references there are to film history. You expect a few jokes about old Hollywood here and there, you don't expect loving recreations of silent cinema though. There are visual nods to Georges Méliès's trick photography, massive practical sets inspired by the Universal Monsters era, and even recreations of iconic silent comedy stunts. This movie features animated versions of legends like Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and Harold Lloyd as part of its celebration of early Hollywood. There are moments where the Minions perform elaborate physical comedy that feels directly inspired by Buster Keaton. And of course, these references really fit because the Minions have always been descendants of silent comedy. They barely speak, their language is mostly nonsensical gibberish with a few recognizable words here and there, their comedy relies almost entirely on visual storytelling, their personalities are exaggerated through movement instead of dialogue. That's exactly how silent comedians worked over 100 years ago. Buster Keaton could make audiences laugh without saying a single word. Harold Lloyd built entire sequences around impossible physical situations. The Minions have essentially been carrying on that tradition this whole time, and this movie absolutely embraces it. Instead of pretending these characters are something they're not, Minions and Monsters finally understands and embraces where they come from. And that's why the slapstick works better here than in previous movies. It's not just random chaos anymore, it's carefully choreographed visual comedy. Some sequences are practically miniature silent films unto themselves. You can tell the animators studied classic comedy timing instead of just throwing explosions at the screen. Even when the jokes are incredibly silly, they're staged with real cinematic craftsmanship. The biggest surprise, however, is the story itself. This is the first Minions movie where I actually cared about what was happening. The central storyline follows James, a minion who dreams of becoming a filmmaker rather than simply serving villains. When a monstrous creature begins consuming everything in its path, his passion for filmmaking becomes unexpectedly tied to saving the world. This surprisingly heartfelt focus on creativity and classic movie making is one of the film's biggest strengths. Don't get me wrong, the minions are still agents of chaos, but the emotional core is much stronger than anything this franchise has attempted before. The idea that storytelling itself can unite people is genuinely sweet without becoming overly sentimental. The monster itself also deserves some credit. Instead of simply existing as another giant CGI creature to defeat, it represents unchecked destruction. It's obviously inspired by the Blob, and it literally devours everything in its path. Movies, sets, cities, history. It's almost symbolic. The minions are trying to preserve creativity against something that consumes everything indiscriminately. I'm probably reading more into it than the filmmakers intended, but the movie actually leaves room for those interpretations. That's already a huge step forward compared to what we've always seen with the minions. Another thing I appreciated is that the film actually trusts visual storytelling this time around. Large sections contain almost no understandable dialogue. Instead, everything is communicated through expressions, movements, editing, and music. Again, a nod to silent cinema. It's remarkable that a major studio animation today is willing to lean this heavily into purely visual storytelling. For younger audiences, it's funny. For film lovers, it's fascinating. And director and Minions co-creator Pierre Coffin certainly knows his movie history. From this movie, it's clear that he's trying to elevate the Minions from the consumption products that they've become into something more. That's really what separates this movie from previous entries in my opinion. Earlier Minions films often felt like 90-minute long collections of sketches, the movie equivalent of a McDonald's meal, or jingling keys in front of a toddler. This one actually builds momentum. Each sequence naturally leads into the next one. The filmmaking storyline gives the movie direction. The monster raises the stakes. The historical backdrop constantly introduces fresh visual ideas. That's a huge improvement in my opinion. Now, is it perfect? No, of course not. There are plenty of problems. Some characters and subplots don't go anywhere, and many gags don't land. The final act eventually becomes louder and more conventional than the brilliant setup promises. Once the monster action sequences escalate, some of the subtle film history satire gives way to the familiar chaotic spectacle the franchise is known for. So basically, the opening hour is stronger than the third act. Part of me wished the film stayed smaller and more focused on filmmaking instead of ending with another save the world climax. But compared to previous Minions movies, this is a massive improvement. I also think this one understands something many franchise films forget. Being self-aware isn't enough. Actually committing to a creative vision matters. This film could have simply thrown in a few references to old Hollywood and called it a day. Instead, it tries to build its entire identity around cinema itself. It's filled with visual references, filmmaking jokes, practical effects recreated through animation, silent comedy timing, and genuine affection for movie history. It is both a love letter to filmmaking and the freshest direction the franchise has taken. That passion comes across. It's also refreshing to see Illumination actually take a creative risk. This studio has often been criticized for playing things safe. Their films usually prioritize mass appeal over artistic ambition. But Minions and Monsters feels like someone inside the studio genuinely wanted to make a movie about movies, and somehow convinced the executives to let them. This is for me the best movie they've made so far. At the end of the day, I still don't think I'm suddenly becoming a Minions fan just because this movie is so much better than the other ones. These characters will not be my favorite animated icons, but this one gave me something I wasn't expecting. A clear passion for filmmaking and storytelling. It's funny to think that characters who mostly communicate through gibberish may actually be one of the purest modern descendants of silent comedy. That idea alone makes this film worth watching, I think. Minions and Monsters won't convert anyone who already dislikes the franchise, but if you've spent years rolling your eyes every time another Minions movie was announced like I have, this might genuinely surprise you. Because underneath all the nonsensical jokes, silly slapstick, and chaos, there's genuine passion for cinema and filmmaking. And that's something I never expected to say about a Minions movie.